Hi and welcome to the Econ Experiment. In this video, we're going to talk about the goods market, and to do that, we need to understand what is GDP, what are its components, and how does that relate to total demand. So let's get right into it. Well, what is GDP? So GDP is the total production that happens within an economy. So the total goods and services that are produced within a country in a given year. And GDP has four broad components: consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. So let's look them up one by one. Now, consumption are the goods and services that are purchased by the consumers. In macroeconomics, it's denoted by the capital letter C, and the equation of consumption is written as C0 plus C1 YD, where YD stands for the disposable income, that is your income minus the taxes that you pay to the government. And the other two things in the equation, C0 and C1, are the autonomous consumption and marginal propensity to consume respectively. So, what is the autonomous consumption? Well, this is the consumption that happens with or without the fact that you are earning income or not. If you notice, it doesn't have a Y component attached to it. This means that this is the consumption that a consumer does to survive. So intuitively, you could understand this as even when you're not earning, you're consuming something, and the money for that consumption comes out of the previous savings that you've had. So at this point of time, you're dis-saving. You're taking money out of your savings and then you're buying goods and services. The other thing, C1, is the marginal propensity to consume. It's usually a fraction of the disposable income. So when you have income to spend, you do not spend all of it, you save some of it, but the amount that you spend is determined by the MPC. Now, typically, MPC can be any value between 0 and 1. And 0 and 1, of course, represent extreme values. So if it is 1, you're spending all of your disposable income. If it is 0, then you're saving all of your disposable income. And well, this is consumption. Now we move on to investment. Investment is determined exogenously, which means that it doesn't factor into the model as being determined within the model. It is determined outside the model. And so we will not discuss this elaborately, and we'll just say that investment is determined by the capital letter I. Then comes government expenditure. Government expenditure is also determined outside the model, but there are two components that come with it. So the first is G, that is government spending, in that how much of the goods and services it is buying. The other is taxes. This is collected from the people, so the tax revenue that the government collects. The difference adds up to GDP. Finally, net exports. These are exports minus imports. That is how much of the goods and services you sold to the people abroad and how much of their goods and services you consumed. And the difference makes up net exports. So ultimately, we write GDP, or the production in an economy, as Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX. And you can further classify this as C0 plus C1 YD plus I plus G plus NX. Further simplification, C0 plus C1 Y minus T plus I plus G plus NX. This is the total production within the economy. Now that we know what is total production, let's move on to understand how GDP relates to total demand. We need to understand the circularity that is assumed between production, income, and total demand. So when we talk of production, it is said that anything that is being produced and is then, of course, being purchased by people translates into income. So if I'm a producer of, say, socks, and you purchase that, when you're buying socks from me, you're generating income for me. And that income, now that I have money after selling socks, I can go and buy myself a pair of shoes. So which generates demand. And then that ultimately leads to further production because people are demanding goods. So I generated demand for a shoe seller. The shoe seller, when I buy that stuff from him, generates income and then goes on to buy whatever he wants. So you see that there is a circularity between production, income, and demand. Production translates into income, income translates into demand, which further translates into production. So this circularity generates equality as well. So when we're saying that production equals income equals demand, so you will notice that in many macroeconomics textbooks, Y would also represent production and would also represent income. And you can understand this intuitively by the circularity that I just mentioned. And when you're looking at the graphs, this is usually represented by a 45-degree line where, let's say, this is income and this is production. And because production translates into income, we get this 45-degree line where any point on this line represents the same value on the x and y axis both. So this is the equality between production and income. And then we go towards the equality, which is also called as the identity, and is usually represented by these three signs between production and demand. So this means that this is always true, which means that total demand is always equal to total production in an economy, which means that Z is always equals to Y, which is always equal to C0 plus C1 YD plus I plus G plus NX. This is how total demand relates to GDP in an economy. So the key takeaways from this video are that GDP has four components, which basically represents the production in an economy. But because this production is somebody's income and that income generates demand, the total production is always equal to total demand. So that was all for this video. If there are any other topics that you would want videos on, please do let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.